Hello everyone, it's Olivia here, aka Story Minded, and I'm going to make the next video for the IGCSE English language mark schemes. Oh, and just to say sorry, on my last video, that's why I kind of spaced out a bit when I was reading paper 1. I felt like something was missing and I'd forgotten to write down the section B part of paper 1, so in case you don't see the description on my other video, I will quickly now tell you what that is. So that's to do with the transactional writing part, the written communication bit. You'll have a writing task from a choice of 2 questions, and they will they'll want you, so you get a choice of 2, you do one of the writing tasks, it's about 45 minutes, and they involve audience form and purpose, which I'll talk about in more detail in another video. I think this video is just going to be breaking down the mark schemes a bit more, because I think this is something I believe in strongly. A lot of students don't really, not all students, but quite a lot of students don't think carefully about the importance of mark schemes. And if you don't know what you're being assessed on, if you don't know what the examiners are looking for, how can you be expected to write a really strong exam? So I think it's really important if you can memorise, or at least know roughly for each section what that examiner is looking for, you are more likely to achieve the grade you want or higher marks. Because examiners, they're not all evil. I think it's quite easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, all examiners, they just want to mark you down, but that's not true. They have so many papers to mark, it's insane to think what examiners have to mark. And if you make their job easy for them, they are more likely to pay attention to your answers, and they are more likely to award you the marks that they can see, because they'll have their checklist, they'll have their mark scheme, and they'll be like, right, they've done this, they've done this, they've done this, marks, marks, marks. It's easy for them. But if you don't put the effort in and you don't try your best, if you just write a half-hearted answer, they have so many to look through, they'll just take one look at it and mark it down, because they don't have time to work out if you've hit the mark scheme or not. And if you haven't put the effort in, they're just going to be like, oh, well, this is going to be in this band. So that would just be based on the quality alone. So for the first set of assessment objectives, they're all to do with reading. So we have assessment objective 1 is read and understand a variety of texts, selecting, interpreting information, ideas and perspectives. So this assessment objective wants you to consider the type of text you're reading. So with the reading sections, they linking back to paper 1, the non-fiction texts. And obviously if you read the fiction text, that's going to be completely different. It's all about being able to read different genres, being able to read different forms. So you might have a newspaper article, there might be some kind of discussion essay. Selecting and interpreting information. This is your ability to look at a large piece of text and being able to pull out the relevant information based on those short and long answer questions you have in your early papers. So that can be your skills in skim reading. You know what parts are important and what parts aren't. And ideas and perspectives. So especially for non-fiction texts, which are obviously written with the intent of them being real, your writer is going to have different perspectives, different beliefs, different things they're trying to get across to the reader. And for fiction as well, when you write, you're writing for a purpose. Writers think carefully about the creative techniques they use. They think carefully about how they're crafting their worlds, their characters, all these kinds of things. They are genuinely thinking about them. They haven't just put it down for no reason, because when we read, we're going to be impacted by a piece of writing. Even if we get bored by a piece of writing, we're still going to have some kind of reaction to it. So it's really important that you think carefully about especially for non-fiction, what is this writer trying to achieve? Why have they used a particular technique? But once again, I'm going to make other videos on more specific things like that. So that's assessment objective 1, and that's worth 15%, which means 15% of your papers that involve assessment objective 1 with your reading skills. That's quite, well, that's one of the lower ones where you can earn marks. Then we have assessment objective 2. Understand and analyse how writers use linguistic and structural devices to achieve their effects. So linguistics is quite a cruel way of saying it, because what I'm doing now is linguistics. Linguistics basically means speech. In a very basic sense of the word, linguistics is just all to do with speech. So when you study or when you read a text, linguistics can relate to literally any part of that writing. So it's thinking about the form, the meaning, the context. So the reason, the context is in why has something been written, where has it been written, why has it been written, what is the purpose of this text. Form can be what the text actually is. So, for example, a novel is a type of form. A poem, and obviously there's many different types of poetry, but a poem is a type of form. And the meaning, what messages do you get from a text? What kind of writing, how does the writing impact you? What techniques make you feel in a particular way? All those kinds of ideas. And structural devices is to do with, there could be writing techniques that link to structure. So, and once again, I will go into a more detailed video because I could literally, there's so much, I could literally just make tons and tons of videos on different structural devices and stuff. But as a brief example, repetition is a structural device because certain words are being repeated. That is a structural device. Or to do with punctuation, especially in poetry. Punctuation is so important in poetry. There's actual specific structural devices you can use in poetry to completely change the meaning of your poem. But once again, I'll go into them in another video. And that's 20%. So this is higher. If you can identify these things when in your reading questions, this is a really good place to earn a lot of marks. And then for the last reading, assessment objective 3, explore links and connections between writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how these are conveyed. So once again, it's thinking about, so this is where it's like, it's almost like when you answer a question, you're trying to get the overall picture. It's how all these tiny pieces build up into one big piece of writing. So, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. So say, for example, you get given a non-fiction text that is protesting against animal abuse, something random like that, or animal testing, some sort of ethical issue. The writer is going to be using a lot of different writing techniques to convey their message that they are against animal testing due to ethical reasons, all these kind of things. So you need to think about how have they conveyed this message. The writer will be using so many different techniques to build up their view. They're not just going to sort of say their view directly. They might use, say, for example, a metaphor, or they might use statistics. So statistical information is a really big part of persuasive writing. Biased facts, all these kinds of elements are what you want to think about. And then on to the last two assessment objectives. I'm not going to talk about the assessment objectives for the spoken presentation thing that you can do because there aren't any really. It's a bit different, that side of it. But for writing, there's assessment objective 4, which is communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, register of writing for specific purposes and audiences. So this is basically your purpose, your form, your audience, and I'll go into that in another detail. And imaginative is, from what you've read, take inspiration from that writing and use some of the writing techniques you've identified. But don't worry, I will go into another video about that because there's so many. And then for the last one, it's assessment objective 5. Write clearly using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures with appropriate paragraph and accurate spag, so spelling, punctuation and grammar. with terms of using like a range of vocabulary, I would highly recommend, like even I still use these kind of resources, thesauruses, dictionaries, anything to get you practicing and thinking carefully about your word choices. When you write, you want to think carefully about what words you're using, because depending on what words you pick, you're going to have completely different impact on your reader. So it's just about thinking carefully about what you're writing, who you are writing for, what you're writing, what effects you want to have. But once again, I will break that down in another video. Anyway, if anyone's watched this, thank you. I know I talk quite fast. I'm trying to slow down. But if you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a comment and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you. Bye.